As Sophie Mokoena mentioned, the leader of the South African delegation to the Pan-African Parliament, Amos Masondo, says the members of Parliament should not be left off the hook for failure to hold the executive accountable when corruption allegations were before Parliament committees. Masondo spoke to our foreign editor, Sophie Mokoena, on the margins of the fourth session of the Pan-African Parliament in Midrand.
The Pan-African Parliament is constituted basically of members of the various parliaments across the African continent. Now, Parliament in South Africa has two houses, the National Assembly and the NCOP. So the delegation led by myself really seeks to represent the South African legislature and to ensure that our voice is heard, and that we too, at the legislature side, makes a contribution in building the voice of Pan-African Parliament and by extension in really ensuring that we make our own contribution in building the continent socially, politically, economically, culturally, and otherwise.
Is the Pan-African Parliament still relevant? Because the argument out there is that it doesn't have teeth.
Well, the Pan-African Parliament, as it stands today, it's work in progress. And that work in progress is dependent on the acceptance, full acceptance by various countries of what is referred to as the Malabo Protocol. Malabo Protocol is meant to basically empower the Pan-African Parliament to make laws and to make meaningful interventions on African matters.
Meaningful interventions. During this COVID-19 pandemic, there was a strong criticism from the NGOs and ordinary citizens of this continent that when different executives around the continent came up with regulations to manage and to address the issue of COVID-19, parliaments were ignored.
Yes, as I was saying, the situation is such that Pan-African Parliament is a work in progress. It's a building block necessary for Africa to make an advancement and perhaps to ensure in the coming years that there's even much more cooperation and working together. Because in the main, I mean, Africa is led through what we call an African government, which is the AU, African Union, which is constituted, as you know, of African heads of state. So we're a work in progress. The more progress we make, the more the presence of a Central African organization will be felt on the entire continent.
Looking at the parliament in South Africa, when you watch what has been happening at the state capture, questions are raised on issues of governance, issues of accountability, and clearly the previous parliament was found wanting. And this is a norm on the continent where you find a situation that in a particular country, members of parliament can scream and shout as much as they can to raise issues, but the executive will always ignore, and because the executive will power, even will power economically.
Well, the executive is very important. In that executive is what is referred to as government. So they wield power economically and otherwise. But the body that really ensures the balance of that power is the legislature. In the South African context, the National Council of Provinces, as well as the National Assembly. Now, this power is wielded at what is generally referred to as accountability and oversight. The parliament is there to hold parliament, the president and members of his cabinet accountable to ensure that they keep within the straight and narrow, as it were, that they do that which is correct, and where they stray, that they are called into order, and that whatever has gone wrong is corrected. Now, the Zondo Commission in the South African context is a very, very important development in that a commission was established to look at the state of capture of the institutions, including government and related entities. What has really happened is that a lot of things that were done wrongly have emerged, and the solutions are also being suggested. I'm sure in the months ahead, we will see some people being charged. In fact, part of that is already happening. If you look at why should the MPs be left off the hook? Because clearly the members of parliament who were in parliament at that time when this rot was happening didn't take the necessary steps in terms of them being responsible to hold the executive accountable. They were found wanting. Should they be left off the hook? No, they shouldn't be left off the hook. One of the things, the key question that the Zondo Commission has raised, and this is acknowledged and accepted throughout the country, is really the question as to where was Parliament when all of these things were happening. And the findings, for instance, of the court in South Africa in relation to the powers and responsibilities of the public protector have been clarified way beyond what exists in law. So to answer the question very briefly, everybody must account, including current and previous members of parliament. Where they are found to have done wrong, they should be censured accordingly. And finally, the Pan-African Parliament in this context, what role can the Pan-African Parliament play to ensure that we really have a corruption-free continent, prosperous continent, but also the continent that respects the human rights? Yeah. We have a big responsibility. All of the things that we are mentioning, human rights, corruption-free continent, prosperous continent, a continent that can stand its own ground and contribute meaningfully to advance the world in matters related to legislature and so on. All of those things must happen. And the African parliaments have a great responsibility to ensure accountability, to ensure oversight, because we can't really be dependent on others to do this work for us. We ourselves must take responsibility. we ourselves must ensure that the things that the AU has said over many years, that the things that have been said by Haile Selassie or Agostinho Neto or Samora Machel, etc., are pursued. So we have a responsibility to ensure that we live up to expectation and address the issues that remain a challenge in the African continent.